Wegu, Megan Kanerahtenha Whyte, your jets. My name is Megan Kanerahtenha Whyte, and I'm an art therapist here in our community. I've been invited today to share with you a bit of an art making process that you can try at home, whether that's by yourself or with your family. It can be for all ages. I'll make it approachable for everybody. And so before I go into what we're going to do and some of the materials that we might need to get ourselves within this space together, I just want to share with you how we're going to go about doing this. So I will lead you through a step-by-step process on how to make a painting. And really what I'd like to add underneath that are just some reflection pieces about what can I do when I feel stressed? What can I do when I feel low? What can I do when my thoughts are kind of all over the place and I'm having a hard time to focus? And so we'll add a little bit of those pieces into our process together. I like to think that paint especially is a gateway to how we feel emotionally. I like to think of emotions as energy in motion, and paint as a material is so helpful in getting that movement and that breath just so naturally when we set that intention in our mind to embodying it in that way. So that being said, let's go through some of the materials that you're going to use and what you'll need for our time together. So in your handy dandy kit that you got, you'll have a couple of materials. If not all of these materials are there, that's okay. There's things that you can find around the house too. So you will need your blank canvas. It might be a different size from mine, and that's okay. You're going to need two different size brushes. So you're going to need a thick one and a thin one. If you only have one type of brush, I can show you ways that you can use them for the different techniques that we want to try today. You're going to need your painter's palette. It might be a paper plate. That's what's most accessible to you today. I've often used plates in the absence of a clean palette, so no worries, it's very easy to clean. You'll need your paints as well. You'll need paper towels, and you're going to need a jar or cup of water that you'll use just to clean your brushes between colors. So before we get started, I'd like to invite you to set up your space however you need to use it. Depending on the type of paint that you received, it's important to remember that these types of paints can be permanent. So if you get them on your hands, it will come off. If you get them on your clothes, because of their fibrousness, it won't come out unless you act really, really, really quick and run it through water. So that being said, make sure that your space is prepared. So sometimes you can put a placemat, some cardboard, newspaper, anything you'd like on your table. If you are a messy painter like I am, I just set up my paints and I'm already covered in it, just to be mindful of what you're wearing. So if you want to put on, just spare clothes that you don't mind if you get paint on it. Otherwise, you can put on a smock. I've made DIY smocks by getting a garbage bag and cutting a head out and arm pieces, and you put it on like a really crinkly dress or coat. So you can do those things to get yourself set up. Make sure your water is set and just have your whole area set up before we begin. I like doing that first, and I think it's important to do that first because it really sets us up to be in that space uninterrupted. It's frustrating sometimes you get in the middle of doing something and then you're like, oh, I forgot this thing or I have to get this thing, and it interrupts our flow. So let's get all of those things set up so that you don't have an interrupted flow. So you can take this moment to pause this video if you haven't done that, and you can unpause when you feel all set up. So the first thing that we're going to do is just to take a deep breath. Sometimes looking at this blank surface can create a lot of anxiousness and nervousness about filling it, and that's really normal. This can be really intimidating. So I'm going to share with you my favorite breath that we'll do before we get started. So What we'll do is we'll breathe in for 4 seconds. We'll hold our breath for 4 seconds. And then you breathe everything out like you're blowing out a birthday candle that just doesn't want to go out in that first breath. And why we do that is our breath is that gateway to calming our body when we feel a little bit anxious and nervous. So let's do that together. We'll breathe in for 4 seconds. And you might notice that your head is a little bit tingly. You might notice your body feels more relaxed. And this is the energy we want to go in our art making today. So that is a breath you can use anytime you want, before an exam, an oral presentation, having to tell somebody something hard, having to tell your parent or your grandparents something that you don't want to tell them. Those are really good breaths that help us to be more present when that stress kind of goes. So we'll come in that landed way. I'm going to introduce you to this painting. So this is a painting of lavender that I like to imagine that it's not sunset, even though these are sunset colors, but more sunrise. When I think of springtime, I think about entering that energy space where things start to come alive again. We look outside on the land and we see, although not right now because it's covered in snow, but soon we'll start to see little patches of grass. We'll start to see little buds appearing. And it's a reminder that in our bodies, this is the season that we start to wake up and our energy starts to wake up. And when we plant our seeds, or sometimes we might plant them indoors even now, it's really about what do I want for this new year? We've had a long period of rest and cold and snowstorms and shoveling, a lot of different things. A lot of different things have happened in our families too that were really hard. And so we want to move into this new space in a good way. And so I wanted to bring lavender. As we go, I'll talk to you a little bit about my relationship with lavender, but I wanted to honor that plant today just because we talked really briefly about that feeling of stress. And we talked about that in relation to starting off on a blank canvas, but also things that can make us feel stressed. And our bodies will tell us when we feel stressed, right? Our heart is beating, our palms are sweaty, our thoughts are racing. And so lavender is a wonderful medicine that's connected to the land that brings us that sense of peace. And so I'll go through that. There'll be a point where we need to wait a little bit for the paint to dry to get to the next step. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's get ourselves set up. We're going to put our practice painting over here. So the first layer we do when we make a painting, or when I make a painting, is we start at the very, 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 very far background. So as far as you can see. And we do that so that we can get all those undertones of colors before we add new layers on top. So what I'll invite you to do is to imagine the paint at this moment before we get it onto the canvas like breath. And just to notice yourself when you're breathing as you're painting, what that feels like. So to begin with, we are going to start with a couple of colors. We're going to start with white, yellow, red, and green, and black. We're going to use all the colors. If you don't have all of those colors, we can make them, especially green. Green is a color that we can make. I like to think that we become color scientists sometimes because we add and subtract different colors just to get a different tone, and it's real exciting. I get excited anyways. So what I'm going to do is kind of start where my horizon line is. So the horizon line is where the sun meets the land. So wherever you want that in your image, you want the grass to start up here, that's okay. You want it to start down here, that's okay. You get to decide where that is on your paper. So I'm going to use red first on my paintbrush. You can use the wide paintbrush for this, and we'll use it the wide way. And we're just going to make a line where you want your horizon line to be. You just spread it. And imagine the long spread. Sometimes we want to go like this. But I'll just invite you to just kind of take a long spread and imagine that like breath or even like water. And you just feel that ebb and flow of the waves going in and out. Now we'll go on top with orange. To make orange, you can take a guess before I say it. You can even say it out loud if you want to. To make orange, we need to mix red and yellow. And if you add more red, it'll be a darker orange. If you add more yellow, it'll be a lighter orange. So that's what I mean by color scientists. You get to decide what shade you'd like. So I have my orange here. I'm using canvas paper. So it's got a bit of a curl to it. And we're just gonna go on top. Sometimes we tend to feel nervous about the colors meeting, and sometimes we get like a little line here. But I invite you just to be courageous and to see what happens. I like to change my thought to what if it doesn't work out to what if it does? And so just allow that brush to go over the red, and you'll start to see this natural transition between colors. And so you imagine this time of day as sunrise. It's the beginning of the day. So much potential of what this day can bring us. I'm gonna go on top with yellow. And same thing, just be courageous and allow the colors to spread on top of each other. You'll get this natural blend, and it's so satisfying. Depending of your age or your meme knowledge, you might know Bob Ross. And so I always like to channel Bob Ross when we make these videos. Just make that happy little color. And as we get to the top, we're going to take white to kind of touch upon the top. Oh, I got some purple in there. Oops. We're just going to allow it to be. If it was meant to be there, it was meant to be there. And we just allow to bring it forward. If you find the colors are kind of all blending together too much, I'd suggest putting less paint on your brush. If you put a big chunk, it's going to take a lot longer to spread. So you can take your time going in and out with those colors. When you've filled that top half, we're going to go in with the green. If you don't have green, to make green, you mix yellow and blue together. Again, if you add more blue, it's going to be like a dark turquoise color. If you're going to add more yellow, it's going to start to become more limey as a green. So just play around with the colors. This is the color green that I have. And same thing. Now we're going to make the earth, where the sky meets the earth. And you can allow it to blend or not. If the red mixes with green, that's okay. That tends to make a brown color, which isn't so terrible because the earth does have a lot of soil that comes out in spring. So not to worry. If you really liked the blending, you can go in with some more yellow just on top. You're gonna get some lighter color, lighter shade there. There. And right at the very bottom here, we have this white mark. Let me just fix that a bit. There we go. This little white mark here. I'm gonna take black And we're just going to, it's curling a bit, go down here. This is a bit of like the shadowed part where the light doesn't quite meet the earth just yet. There. And we just allow the blend to happen. Oops. This easel is meant for larger canvases. It's actually a DIY made from old wood and just kind of screwed together. So you don't have to go to a store to get an easel. This is just recycled wood. There. So you're going to have this nice transition of a sunrise from dark to light. You can add more. If you notice, once the colors start to dry, you can add a little bit more. So to rinse my brush, I usually like to press really hard on the bottom, like really push hard, like you're trying to scrub the bottom, just to get some of the paint that's stuck between the bristles out. And then dry your brush. So if you find like, now that it's drying, it's a bit dark, you can always go on top and add more. I'll add a little more yellow. I can see the color nicely here, but when I look at the screen, it kind of looks one solid color. So just for contrast's sake, I'll add a bit more yellow just to get a bit of a brightness to it. There. So we're going to let that set for a little bit because the next part might blend a little bit. So when you're not using your brush, you put it in the water, because if we leave the brush out, it hardens and it's like cement, and it's really, really hard to unclog it once it's hardened. So while we're waiting for that to dry a little bit, I want to share with you a little bit about lavender. When we talk about how we calm ourselves, sometimes we feel like, how do I calm my thoughts? How do I calm what's happening for me right now? I feel like I want to cry, or I feel like I'm angry and I want to yell at somebody, or I'm having a really big wave of a feeling. The best way to help our bodies or help ourselves feel calm and present again is actually through our bodies. So through our five senses. So what we see, what we smell, what we taste, what we hear, and what we feel. So if you notice in the background, I have some calming music because that's really helpful in kind of mapping the way we want to feel. And the type of music can invite us to feel different things. So when I think about lavender, there's many ways that it can help us to what we call regulate or relax our bodies. So one way that it's helpful with regular lavender, so this is harvested lavender from last year, and it still smells pretty strong. Smelling it can also help, I want to say, take our bodies back from a feeling. So taking a big smell of lavender is helpful. Sometimes I've made little pouches, so you can put lavender in the pouches and you put it under your pillow, and it helps with sleep. It can help relax. You can also use essential oils and essential oil. A wonderful way when we're having a huge feeling is you take some essential oil and you put it on your wrist, rub it together, and you can smell it. Take a big, big breath in, and you'll notice it'll wash over you like a wave. Because again, our five senses is the fastest way to help our body. Really, breathing is the best way, but sometimes it's hard to breathe when we're feeling really anxious, right? My breath goes up here when I feel anxious. And so it takes a bit of time for my body to relax before I can take a deep breath. You can also drink it like a tea. This one's my favorite. I don't know if it's mirrored, if it's backwards or not, but this is, actually it's French, chamomile and lavender. And so you can have it as a tea, and that really helps to regulate our body. So We think about all kinds of ways on how can I feel calm when I'm feeling stressed, and the land always has an answer for us when we know who to ask or how to remember that way of knowing and connecting. So those are some really helpful ways to help ourselves land after a tough time. Whether you're 5 years old, 15 years old, 25 years old, 65 years old, our bodies are always connected. So these are helpful tools at any age. So we'll always be stressed. Something will always happen. That's part of life. And so we have a little toolkit to help us. So if I come back to my painting, I can feel that it's a little bit sticky, but it's mostly dry. If yours is still really wet, that's okay. Sometimes I speed up the process, and if you have a hair dryer, you can plug it in and you blow dry it, and it'll be dry within like 3 minutes. So if you feel like I don't want to pause this video and wait, that's okay. So you can always pause this video and wait until it's more dry. So now we're going to jump back to it and go to the next step. So for this next step, we're not using the big brush, we're using the thin brush. If you don't have a thin brush and all you have is the thick brush, I'm going to invite you not to paint the thick way, but to paint the thin way. So that's going to help you make a nice line. That will be helpful. So now what you're going to do is take the green that you made. If you don't have enough green, you can make more green. So I'm just going to add a little bit more green. I didn't have enough green. So I'm just going to add some more blue and mix those together. Okay, now I have more green. So what I'd invite you to do is to take the tip of your brush, because you might have a lot of paint, and you just kind of push it so you have just a little bit of paint so it's not too blobby. And what we're going to do is make the stems and the grass of the lavender. So this, I invite you to not focus too hard, because when we focus really hard, I don't know about you, but sometimes my hand gets really shaky and then all of a sudden I have electric bolts instead of grass, which, you do you. You can also have electric bolts. There's nothing wrong with that. So what I like to do is just trust my hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the bottom and just go whew, and just allow it to go where it's going to go. And just go whew. And if it dries out like mine, you can kind of go on top. And we're just going to make a bunch of lines. Doesn't matter where they go. Sometimes we get kind of stuck on the idea that it has to be perfect and it's not straight. And what I want to remind you is really, really think about it. In nature, there is no such thing as a straight line. Really think about it. Even the horizon line isn't straight. There's mountains, there's hills, there's forest. You think about a tree and it's all wiggly. There's no straight line. Humans created straight lines and they've been stressed about it ever since. So just allow yourself to let the line be what it's going to be. There's no mistakes in nature. They just are. Bunch of lines. You can make some longer ones if you want to. You have freedom. That's what I like about this approach to painting, guided painting rather. Because although I'm showing you how to do something, you have freedom to decide how you're going to do it. No two paintings are going to be alike, that's for sure. Right. When you feel like you have enough blades of grass, you can even go in if you wanted some darker ones. So to make darker ones, I'm adding just a little bit of black to my green, only a little bit. Black is a powerful, powerful color. Just to add some kind of depth. But there's some darker blades of grass and lighter blades of grass. Let's go on in there. Don't think too hard about it. There. So I got some different colors, different shades. So I'm going to clean my brush. Again, you press hard on the bottom, really get some of those chunks out. And then dry your brush. And what we're going to do is make purple. So if you don't have purple readily made, to make purple, we mix blue and red. The more blue you add, the darker it's going to be and the more plum-like it's going to be. If you add more red, it's going to be more warm purple, almost like a dark pink almost. So play around with your shades of color. For this next section, we're going to use purple and white. So to take your time to mix your purple, and again, you go back and forth. If it's too dark, add a little more red. If it's too light, add a little more blue and play around until you find a shade that you like. To make the lavender pieces, this part's a lot of fun actually. Well, it's all fun, but I really like this part. I have fun doing it. Is this one I'm not going to worry about how blobby it is. So you dip it in your paint. I have a colorful palette. I like to use paint a lot. And then we're just going to make dots. Doesn't have to be perfect. You can make some space. If we look at a lavender piece, let me pull one out. You can see that it's not all perfectly clumped together. There's some clumps on the bottom, there's some at the top. So there's no wrong way. They grow as they're going to grow. You can see my cat in the background. My cats aren't normally allowed in this room, but she snuck in when I was opening the door, so she'll just sit there. So I'm going to dot it on all the tips. Just dot it. Sometimes I like to imagine that on this sunrise, there's a bit of wind. And I'm just gonna add some little dots here. Just imagining some of the flower pods, I guess you can say, are blowing in the wind, going to spread somewhere else. Now what I'm gonna do is take some white. I'm not gonna clean my brush. I'm just gonna allow it to still be purple. Put it in the white, just in the very tops. I'm gonna dot it down. And you can see it starts to blend, but not fully. And it's this bright lavender color that we're making. Just allow the paint that's on your brush to do what it's got to do. We don't have to think too hard. Now, if all that you've had is a thick brush, you can still do this effect by doing a corner, or you can take the back of the brush and you can still dot it. It'll take a bit longer, but you can use the point of the brush. Actually, that looks kind of cool. It's blending with the light. I like to think that there's no mistakes. There's just happy little discoveries. This is Sharona. You all get to meet my cat. And there, you just keep adding until you feel like you're finished. And I think that's all for the instructional pieces of this piece. If you wanted to go back in after you have the base layer and add some different tones, you can. You can go in with yellow if you wanted to and kind of add some distinguishing lines, I guess, in your blades of grass. You can go in and add all those little details as you'd like. And so today we have honored lavender as one of our medicines, and there's so many more weeds, I want to say, medicines, earthy spaces that we just look at as just wildflowers, but they all have a purpose that isn't just being a flower. So to be curious, who knows, maybe we can make a series of paintings that are about honoring those different medicines that we have. And so before we close for today, just there was a reminder that lavender is a flexible herb that we can use to help regulate our bodies. Remembering that when we feel stressed, the fastest way to relax is through breath. And we did that one breath where you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold your breath for 4 seconds, and you breathe out like you're blowing out a birthday candle that just refuses to go out till all of your lungs are empty. That's a really great way to relax in the moment. But if you feel like right now that's not doing the trick, that's okay. Every day is different. Remembering that our five senses can help us come back home inside of ourselves. With our friend the lavender here, you can smell it, put it in a little bag, have it in your school bag, your purse, under your pillow, and just to smell it. You'll notice how you feel. As an essential oil, put it on your wrist, and you just breathe in the scent. You can also have it as a tea, which is actually what I am going to do with my Ursula cup. And that being said, I want to thank you for having the courage to try something new, having the courage to explore, hopefully had a few laughs, but also had a moment to just really connect with yourself through the painting, right? It's not always about what it looks like in the end. It's about what it feels like doing it. And we tried different ways of painting together. And so I want to thank you for having that courage and for trying this out all the way through to the end of the video and creating something different. So with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your evening, the rest of your night. And it was a pleasure to be here with you virtually. And until next time, have a good night.